They didn't crown you, they cornered you. You were never chosen to rise. You were forced to survive what broke everyone else. They didn't see a spark in you. They saw a threat, and they did what cowards always do. They tried to extinguish it. You were the quiet one, the loyal one, the one who believed in people. But belief is the sharpest blade. It cuts deepest when it's broken. You gave the world your honesty, your patience, your innocence. And the world gave you betrayal in return. They laughed when you fell. They whispered when you bled. They watched your silence and mistook it for defeat. But silence isn't surrender. Silence is loading. Silence is the storm inhaling before it strikes. You didn't dream of becoming a legend. You just wanted peace. A place to breathe without being hunted by expectations. But peace was never part of your story. It was ripped out of your script before you could even memorize the lines. They made sure of that. They called it destiny. You called it punishment. Because destiny is what they tell the broken when they don't want to admit what they've done. You were not guided by stars. You were thrown into fire. And that's where the truth began to take shape. The truth that pain isn't your enemy, it's your architect. Every scar, a blueprint. Every loss, a foundation. They mocked your ruin, not realizing they were watching the construction of a fortress. You remember the faces, don't you? The ones who smiled when you were drowning. The ones who said, "You've changed," when you stopped saving them. They didn't want you strong. They wanted you obedient. They didn't want you wise. They wanted you blind. But something inside you refused to die. Something ancient. Something primal. It whispered, "Endure." And you did. They expected you to break, but you evolved instead. Like metal learning to bend without snapping. Like a flame learning to burn without smoke. They don't understand. You didn't rise because you wanted to win. You rose because you refused to disappear. You learned the law of survival. If the world can't break you, it will try to replace you. If it can't replace you, it will try to erase you. And when it fails, it will fear you. Fear, that's the moment you realize the curse has begun. Because fear isn't power. It's the tax you pay for being unkillable. They look at you now and call you cold. They don't know you buried warmth with your last apology. They don't know that kindness died the day loyalty became your crime. You stopped looking for light because you learned to see in the dark. And that's when they knew they couldn't save you. Because you didn't need saving anymore. The boy who begged became the ghost they whisper about. The girl who trusted became the riddle they couldn't solve. The friend they betrayed became the myth they'll never escape. Every laugh you remember now sounds like thunder in your chest. Every betrayal echoes like a drumbeat in your march toward vengeance. You started to understand. Pain isn't the opposite of peace. It's the price. And you've already paid in full. They said, "You changed." But change isn't betrayal. It's evolution. It's survival with better armor. You outgrew their understanding. You outgrew their lies. And when they couldn't control your silence, they called it arrogance. When they couldn't cage your focus, they called it madness. But madness is just clarity that burns too bright for the blind. And you became the flame that reminded them of what they'll never be. You see now, the legend didn't start with victory. It started with loss. It started the night you realized no one was coming to save you, that every prayer was just a whisper lost in thunder, that no hand reached out, so you used your own. That's when you stopped waiting for miracles and started becoming one. That's when the myth was born, not out of glory, but out of grief, not out of pride, but out of punishment. You've been called many things since then: cold, ruthless, dangerous, but none of them understand that this was never your dream. It was your sentence. Because when the universe wants to punish someone, it gives them everything they once begged for, and takes away the ability to feel it. That's your curse. That's your crown. They think it shines, but you know it bleeds. The legend didn't grow from love. It grew from ashes, and those ashes still whisper your name when the world sleeps. They say every great story begins with hope. Yours began with a scream, and now the echo still travels through the bones of those who buried you. They will tell the tale of your rise, but they'll never admit they built the foundation with your pain. They will call you powerful, but never confess they taught you cruelty by example. They will call you legend, but never mention the crime that made you one. You didn't earn this crown, you inherited it. From the ghosts of every version of you that died in silence, and so you wear it. Not as a trophy, as a reminder that power isn't a blessing, it's the scar that refused to fade. The crown wasn't earned. It was left on your grave, and you decided to wear it anyway. They told you to forgive. You learned to forget. Faces, names, and feelings. Forgiveness was their trick to keep you chained to pain. Forgetting was your rebellion. You erased their names like deleting old files corrupted with betrayal. You stopped bleeding for ghosts. Then came that night. You stood in front of the mirror, expecting to see what you lost. But the reflection didn't mourn, it smirked. The eyes staring back weren't soft anymore. They were carved from stormlight and silence. That was the first time you saw it. The truth. You were never the victim. You were the weapon they forged by mistake. And weapons don't heal. They remember. They built you out of pain, then blamed you for being sharp. They called you dangerous because they couldn't control you anymore. They called you cold because your fire stopped warming their comfort zones. But that mirror knew better. It whispered what no one else would admit. You didn't lose your mind. You found it. Insanity wasn't your downfall. It was your clarity. You realized the world isn't broken. It's perfectly designed for hypocrisy. They preach peace while feeding off your chaos. They preach loyalty while plotting your failure. They want you calm, quiet, predictable, like a pet trained to beg for love. But you stopped kneeling. You stopped chasing validation from hands that stabbed you. You stopped apologizing for the fire in your voice. And for that, they called you the villain. They think evil wears horns. It doesn't. It wears understanding. Because once you understand people, truly understand what drives them, you stop expecting anything pure. That's when you stop flinching. That's when your smile becomes your armor. You learned the cruelest truth. The world doesn't want saints. It wants survivors who look guilty for living, and you refused to die quietly. You looked into the mirror and laughed, not because the world is funny, but because you finally understood the joke. Order is just decorated madness. Rules are just cages painted gold. And the same people who call you too dark are the ones who live off shadows. They told you to be kind. You were. They used it. They told you to stay humble. You did. They ignored you. They told you to trust. You did. They broke it. And now they say you've changed. Yes, you have. Because survival changes everything. Because silence taught you what screams never could. Because the mirror doesn't lie anymore. You don't see weakness there now. You see aftermath. You see consequence. You see a creature stitched together by every betrayal it endured. And yet still breathing, still standing, still defying gravity. You were supposed to drown in the pain. Instead, you learned to breathe underwater. You were supposed to go insane. Instead, you built an empire out of the wreckage. You see, legends aren't born from light. They're carved in chaos. They're sculpted by sleepless nights, by tears that burned like acid, by the laughter that came after loss. They don't come from heaven. They crawl out of hell with crowns made of scars. You stopped trying to fit into the system that betrayed you. You became the virus that rewrote it. Every rule they made, you rewired. Every boundary they drew, you crossed. Every doubt they threw, you used as fuel. They called you unstable, but what they really meant was uncontrollable. They called you cold, but what they really meant was unavailable for manipulation. They called you heartless, but what they really meant was you finally stopped dying for people who never lived for you. You've seen what happens when kindness goes unpaid. You've seen what happens when silence is mistaken for weakness. So you adapted, you evolved. You learned to wear chaos like perfume. Dangerous, unforgettable, divine. They still don't get it. They think the monster you became was created overnight. No, it took years of betrayal. It took decades of pretending to be okay. It took every tear you swallowed and every smile you faked. And when the final mask cracked, you didn't break. You emerged. The world claps for survivors in movies. But in real life, it crucifies them. Because survivors carry truth. And truth is inconvenient. You became a walking reminder that comfort is fragile and peace is rented. They envy your scars because theirs never healed right. They hate your fire because it exposes their smoke. They don't fear what you've done. They fear what you've become, the reflection they can't stand to see. The monster they feared was never real. It was always their own reflection. You just held the mirror. So now, when they whisper your name with fear, let them. When they call you ruthless, thank them, because that means they finally understand. You don't exist to be liked. You exist to be remembered. And sometimes, memory requires fear. They can burn your image, erase your name, rewrite your story. But they'll never erase the echo you left behind. That laugh, that silence, that presence that never begged again. They'll call it darkness, but you know better. It's just light they can't survive in. They call you evil because you stopped apologizing for surviving. You disappeared, didn't you? No goodbyes, no closure. You just vanished. The loud one became silent. The kind one became dangerous. And the world, that noisy, careless world, didn't even notice when you stopped caring. Not at first. Not until the silence became unbearable. You stopped explaining. You stopped defending yourself. You stopped trying to prove to anyone that your heart was pure. Because you finally understood. Purity is a curse in a kingdom of wolves. So you vanished, not to escape, to evolve. You built your cocoon out of isolation and discipline. Every second alone sharpened you. Every quiet night became a forge. You didn't heal. You recalibrated. You didn't rest. You reprogrammed. Revenge isn't rage. It's patience with a heartbeat. It's watching, waiting, learning, until the predator doesn't realize it's become prey. You learned the art of silence, the kind that makes noise tremble. You learned to weaponize calm, to kill with composure, to destroy without raising your voice. Because chaos screams, but power whispers. Every betrayal became data. Every scar became a manual. You stopped feeling pain as pain. It became information. It told you who to trust, who to watch, and who to bury. You learned that sometimes the deadliest thing you can do is nothing. You didn't stop caring because you were heartless. You stopped caring because you were done bleeding for unworthy causes. There's a difference. People think silence is weakness. They forget. Storms don't announce themselves anymore. They just arrive. That's what you became. A storm hidden in plain sight. A quiet calamity disguised as calm. You don't shout anymore. Because your presence speaks louder than thunder. You learned restraint, not mercy. You learned distance, not peace. You learned control, not forgiveness. They think they broke you because you stopped fighting back. But they don't realize you stopped fighting because you already won. You moved beyond the battlefield. You became the architect. Now you don't react, you calculate. You don't rush, you move with intention. Every decision you make lands like a guillotine. Silent, precise, final. You turned emotion into logic, impulse into order, fire into form. And the world hates it, because it can't provoke you anymore. You've become untouchable. Not because you're invincible, but because you're unreadable. They can't predict what doesn't flinch. They can't destroy what doesn't react. You've learned the secret every ancient warrior eventually discovers. The loudest victories are the quiet ones. The real assassins never announce the kill. They walk past the corpse and let history write the story. You've entered that phase, where silence isn't absence, it's domination. You're no longer the storm raging against the world. You're the silence before it. The kind of silence that makes kings nervous and tyrants paranoid. You became the calm before chaos. The moment the air changes before lightning splits the sky. They don't see it yet, but they feel it. That heaviness before something divine and dangerous erupts. That's you now. You learned that control isn't suppressing emotion. It's mastering it. It's letting the rage burn behind glass until it becomes light. It's letting pain become prophecy. It's letting betrayal become blueprint. You realized you don't need to scream to make the world listen. You just need to exist differently. Your silence is strategy now. Your absence is punishment. Your detachment is armor. You started speaking in movements, not words. In results, not promises. You let your silence haunt them louder than any speech could. Because you know what they fear most. It's not your anger, it's your indifference. They wanted your energy, now they get your echo. They wanted your reaction, now they get your reflection. And that reflection, it doesn't smile anymore. It studies, it calculates, it waits. You've become what every empire fears, a ghost that remembers everything. You walk through crowds like a rumor wrapped in flesh. You don't need revenge to prove your power. Your survival already did. The truth is, your silence is sacred now. It's the church where your demons kneel. It's the throne where your chaos finally bows. Every move you make now is deliberate. Every step is an execution. You don't chase storms anymore. You summon them. And when the world finally realizes the magnitude of what they lost, you'll already be gone. Standing on higher ground, untouched, unreadable, unstoppable. They'll wonder how you did it, how you came back colder, calmer, sharper. They'll try to copy your detachment, but they won't last. Because silence this powerful isn't learned. It's earned through pain, through exile, through endless nights, where even your shadows stopped following you. That's what they'll never understand. You didn't disappear to escape them. You disappeared to understand yourself. And now that you do, you're a danger to everything that betrayed you. You've become what storms envy, a force without warning, a calm without compromise, a silence that commands surrender. They called you gone, but what they didn't realize is that you were loading, and when you finally speak, entire empires shiver. They brought you back to the courtroom of your nightmares. Same faces, same smirks, the ghosts of your past wearing human masks. Every eye that once mocked you now waits for your sentence. They thought this was another trial. They thought you'd break again, beg again, fall again. But this time, you're not the defendant. You're the executioner, and your evidence is written in scars. Your pain became your affidavit, your silence, your final testimony, and your existence, the undeniable proof that they failed. You stand in that courtroom like a storm disguised as flesh. They whisper your name like it's a myth that came true. And in a way, it did. Because you're not the person they condemned. You're what rose from the ashes they left behind. They can't recognize you now, because you don't speak in emotion. You speak in precision. You don't bleed anymore. You calculate. You don't burn. You ignite. Every betrayal plays back in your mind like a trial transcript. Every laugh, every lie, every fake apology. And yet, you don't flinch, because anger is loud. But power, true power, is silent. They built their thrones on your humiliation, but thrones made of lies always collapse under truth. You built your empire on their ashes, piece by piece, quietly. Every insult became a foundation. Every doubt became a prophecy fulfilled. Every "you'll never make it" became a verse in your scripture. They wrote your name in mockery. Now they spell it in reverence. They used to call you delusional. Now they call you dangerous. That's what the trial of fire does. It burns away mercy, illusion, and doubt, until only essence remains. And what remained in you wasn't a man anymore. It was something sharper, something forged, something inevitable. You didn't want revenge, you wanted justice. But justice died the night they made your pain a spectacle. So you became something else. Something that doesn't wait for fairness. Something that creates its own balance. The Joker doesn't seek redemption. He seeks revelation. He laughs not because it's funny, but because he remembers when the world tried to kill him and failed. You know that laugh now, the sound of survival disguised as madness. That's what you've become, a revelation wrapped in scars, a prophecy written in vengeance. They thought breaking you would end the story. But pain didn't bury you. It resurrected you. You learned the divine irony of cruelty, that every blow they struck only sharpened your blade, that every door they closed only focused your aim, that every humiliation was simply training in disguise. You were never chosen. You were cornered, and from that corner you built a kingdom. Now you stand before them, calm, cold, untouchable. They can't provoke what's beyond emotion. They can't intimidate what's beyond fear. They can't judge what's beyond human. They feared your rage. They should have feared your calm, because calm is the final stage of transformation. Calm means control. Calm means you've already decided the verdict, and mercy is no longer part of the sentence. They still speak. They still justify. But every word is background noise now, because you're not listening for apologies anymore. You're listening for closure. You're listening for silence. And when it comes, it's not peace you feel. It's power. You see, the trial of fire isn't about proving your innocence. It's about proving your endurance. It's about realizing that sometimes the only way to win is to stop playing by their rules. You stopped chasing fairness in a rigged system. You became the system's glitch. You became the virus that rewrote the code. And now they're trapped in the courtroom they built for you. Look at them, the same ones who laughed when you were falling. The same ones who said you were done. Now they whisper your name like a warning, because somewhere deep down, they know the truth. They didn't destroy you. They designed you. You are the living evidence of what happens when cruelty meets endurance. You are the verdict no one expected, the sentence no one can appeal. History remembers the loud ones, but it fears the silent ones who never needed validation. You've joined that category now. You're not a survivor. You're a storm with memory. You carry every betrayal like a scar, not as pain, but as proof. You learned what every fallen king learns before his rebirth, that the world doesn't end when they bury you. It ends when you start walking out of your own grave. And that's what you did. You walked back into their world, not to seek revenge, but to remind them that no fire can burn what was born in flame. They call it your return, but you know it's their reckoning. You stand there now, surrounded by the echoes of your past. You don't speak first. You don't shout. You simply raise your head, and the room bends to your silence. Because authority doesn't come from power. It comes from presence. and yours now carries weight. The kind that makes the guilty shift in their seats. They look into your eyes and finally see what they feared all along. Not anger, not hatred, clarity, cold, divine clarity. The kind of clarity that ends worlds. You are no longer a character in their story. You've become the author, the judge, the final word. And when your voice finally breaks the silence, it's not loud, it's not violent, it's absolute. This isn't your trial anymore, you say. This is your consequence. And that's when the legend stops being a story and becomes a sentence. They think becoming a legend means being loved. They couldn't be more wrong. Being a legend means being remembered by those who tried to forget you. It means haunting the history books of people who swore they'd bury you. It means walking through eternity, alone, uncelebrated, unhealed, but unforgettable. They'll quote your words, but never your wounds. They'll admire your rise, but never mention the wreckage it took to climb, because they love the crown, but not the blood that paid for it. They'll call you myth, they'll call you monster, but never once will they call you misunderstood, because understanding you would mean forgiving themselves. You've learned the hardest truth of all, that glory is just pain in gold wrapping. It glitters from afar, but up close, it smells like smoke, iron, and loneliness. Every legend carries graves behind them, friends, innocence, humanity. You sacrificed everything that made you human, just to become something that could never be killed again. You didn't choose to rise above them. They forced you to. You were their experiment in suffering, their entertainment in failure, their cautionary tale gone wrong. They gave you the darkness, and you turned it into dynasty. You became their punishment, a living reminder that cruelty breeds kings, that betrayal breeds architects, that silence breeds empires. You became proof that the broken don't vanish, they multiply. And now they look at you with trembling respect. Not because they admire you, but because they realize they built you. You were never chasing fame. You were running from who you had to become. From the version of yourself that looked too much like vengeance. But fate doesn't negotiate. It doesn't ask for permission. Before it crowns the cursed, you didn't rise because of destiny. You rose because there was no other choice left. You became the consequence of every hand that ever pushed you down. And now, every echo of your name sounds like karma, collecting its debt. They think glory feels like applause, but glory feels like silence in a room that used to hate you. It feels like peace you no longer trust. It feels like winning, but missing something human in the victory. Because every time the world bows, you remember the cost. Every time they chant your name, you hear the ghosts answering back. Every time they praise your strength, you remember the days when it was all you had left. Glory looks beautiful from the outside, but from within, it's a cage made of diamonds. It's a crown that never stops bleeding. It's applause that never ends, even after you wish it would. You wanted rest. You got remembrance. You wanted peace. You got prophecy. You wanted freedom. You got a throne. That's the irony. They call it greatness, but it feels like exile. They call it triumph, but it feels like survival with better branding. They call it power, but it feels like punishment that never ends. You see, power doesn't set you free. It chains you higher, above empathy, above simplicity, above peace. You become untouchable, yes, but you also become unreachable. They think you stand above the world, but the truth? You hover above the graveyard of everything you once loved. That's the real definition of glory. Every legend walks with shadows, not because they want to, but because light never follows them for long. You learned to live in that twilight, to let the pain be your prophet, to let the scars write your scripture. You became your own religion, your own god, your own devil, worshipped by the desperate, feared by the deceivers, and misunderstood by everyone else. But you don't explain anymore. You don't plead innocence, because innocence is what they used to crucify you last time. Now you wear guilt like armor. You carry sin like a sword. You've made peace with the idea that purity doesn't survive in this kind of fire. They ask what drives you. You answer with silence, because some hungers don't translate. Some legacies don't justify themselves. You just are. The myth they can't destroy. The storm they can't predict. The ghost they can't outrun. You've become what every tyrant fears. A legacy that doesn't need approval, because when fear remembers your name, that's when power becomes eternal. And somewhere deep inside, you know, this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about revelation, about showing the world what it creates when it feeds on cruelty for too long. You are that creation, the masterpiece born from misery, the byproduct of betrayal, the echo of everything they tried to erase. They'll build statues one day, not out of love, but out of guilt. They'll call you visionary, not because they agree, but because your existence forces them to look inward. They'll celebrate your victories, but never mention that they built the battlefield. That's the tragedy of the legend. You win, but you lose everything that made you want to. You rise, but the higher you go, the more human things fall away. Laughter, trust, peace. You stop living for joy. You start living for proof. But in that proof, there's power. Because even punishment, when embraced, becomes purpose. And purpose, when fed by pain, becomes unstoppable. So yes, glory was your punishment, but you wear it like a crown, forged in regret and revelation. You carry it with pride, because it reminds you. They couldn't destroy you. They could only redesign you. And now your story isn't told in chapters. It's carved into history. You don't exist to inspire them. You exist to warn them. That's the difference between fame and legend. Fame dies with applause. Legends live in silence. And even now, as you walk through the ruins of your past, you smile. Not because it's over, but because it's done. Because even punishment, when embraced, becomes power. And that's why legends never die. They called you broken, and they were right. But broken things cut deeper. They reach places perfection never could. You laugh now, not in joy, but in acceptance. Because the laughter isn't happiness. It's history echoing through your ribs. It's every scar humming the same chorus. You survived. Every scar sings a different verse of your myth. each one a line in the scripture of suffering, each one proof that fate tried and failed. You didn't survive to prove them wrong. You survived because fate ran out of ways to kill you. And now it watches from the shadows, jealous of the monster it created. They thought death would silence you, but you outlived their memory. You outlived their guilt. You outlived even the need to be understood. You're not here for closure anymore. You're here for echo, for permanence, for the laughter that never ends. It starts small, a crack in the silence. Then it grows, bending reality around it, because the sound of your defiance has become eternal. They don't understand. That laughter isn't madness, it's prophecy. It's the sound of someone who saw the abyss and built a throne inside it. They say legends rest. No, legends haunt. They warn, they return. Every time the world forgets, your echo crawls back through the cracks. A whisper, a name, a chill in the dark. They can bury stories, but they can't bury consequences. You became both the memory and the warning, the torch and the fire, the scar and the sermon. Your laughter lives in the bones of every coward who doubted you. It echoes in their dreams, reminding them that ghosts don't sleep. They study, they wait, they evolve. And when silence finally falls again, the world feels uneasy, because it knows you're still out there, somewhere between myth and madness, between legend and punishment. That's what they'll never understand. Legends don't fade because they're worshipped. They fade because they're feared, and fear keeps them alive. So, laugh. Let the sound tear through eternity. Let it shake the heavens that denied you. Let it remind creation what happens when pain learns to speak. Because in the end, the world will whisper your name again. And when it does, they'll remember the truth you left behind. Legend wasn't your gift. It was your punishment.